Ava Hart never imagined her wedding day would feel like a funeral. She stood in front of the mirror, dressed in ivory silk that clung to her body like a lie. The gown was flawless, hand-stitched lace, delicate pearls, a train that whispered luxury with every movement. Any other woman would have felt like a princess. Ava felt like a prisoner. Behind her, the door creaked open. "You're late," her aunt said sharply. "The Blackwood family doesn't tolerate delays." Ava swallowed. The name alone made her chest tighten. Lucas Blackwood, CEO, billionaire, arrogant, untouchable. And in less than an hour, her husband. She hadn't agreed to this marriage. Not truly. She had been cornered into it, boxed in by debt, pressure, and a contract disguised as salvation. Her father's failing company, her mother's medical bills. Every path had led to one unavoidable conclusion. Marry Lucas Blackwood, or lose everything. Downstairs, guests filled the grand hall of the Blackwood estate. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Champagne flowed freely. This wasn't a wedding. It was a business transaction disguised as romance. Lucas stood at the altar, tall and immaculately dressed in a tailored black suit. His expression was unreadable, his jaw set with confidence, bordering on contempt. He hadn't even glanced back to see if she had arrived. To him, this was just another acquisition. When Ava finally walked down the aisle, every step felt heavy. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to look at him, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. The vows were short, efficient, cold. "I do," Lucas said without hesitation. Ava's voice barely carried when she spoke the same words. The applause was thunderous. She felt nothing. Later that evening, Ava stood alone on the balcony of the estate, gripping the railing as the night air cooled her burning skin. The city lights glittered below like distant stars, so close yet unreachable. "You're already running," a voice said behind her. She turned. Lucas leaned against the doorway, loosening his cufflinks, his presence commanding without effort. "I'm not," she replied stiffly. "You didn't look at me once during the ceremony," he said. "Most brides at least pretend." Ava met his gaze then, fire flashing in her eyes. "Most brides aren't forced." Something flickered across his face, annoyance perhaps, or interest. "You weren't forced," he said calmly. "You signed the contract." She laughed bitterly. "You call that a choice?" Lucas stepped closer. "I call it reality." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. "You'll live here," he continued. "You'll attend events when required. You'll represent the Blackwood name appropriately." "And if I refuse?" Ava asked. Lucas's lips curved into a faint smile. "You won't." That night, Ava lay awake in the massive bedroom they were meant to share, though a wide space separated them like an unspoken agreement. Lucas slept on the other side, calm and unbothered, as if he hadn't just altered her life forever. She stared at the ceiling, anger simmering beneath her fear. She would not be controlled. The following weeks were a blur of luxury and isolation. Ava had access to everything: designer clothes, a personal driver, unlimited credit, but none of it felt like freedom. Lucas dictated her schedule, her appearances, her public image. He was distant but watchful, cold yet possessive. At a charity gala one evening, Ava spoke freely with a guest, a young entrepreneur who laughed at her jokes, treating her like a person instead of a trophy. Lucas noticed immediately, his hand wrapped around her wrist mid-conversation. "Smile," he murmured under his breath. "You're embarrassing me." She yanked her hand free. "I'm not your property." His eyes darkened. "You wear my name, not my soul," she snapped. That night they argued for the first time. "You don't get to control who I speak to," Ava said, standing her ground. "I get to protect what's mine," Lucas replied. She froze. "I'm not something you own." Lucas stepped closer, his voice low. "Then why does the thought of losing you bother me?" The question stunned them both. Ava turned away, heart racing. She didn't understand him, and she didn't want to. But deep down, she sensed something dangerous. Lucas Blackwood was not used to wanting things he couldn't control, and he had no intention of letting her go. Ava quickly learned that being married to Lucas Blackwood meant living inside a beautifully decorated cage. Every morning, the curtains were drawn by staff before she woke. Breakfast was prepared exactly how Lucas liked it, even when he wasn't present. Her schedule appeared on a tablet left neatly on the dresser. Charity lunches, board dinners, photo opportunities. Never once did anyone ask what she wanted. At first, Ava complied quietly. She observed, she listened, she learned. Lucas was a man of control, precision, order. He spoke little at home but commanded everything without raising his voice. Employees obeyed instantly. Executives feared his silence more than his anger. And Ava, his wife on paper, was treated as a symbol, not a partner. But Ava Hart had not survived years of struggle by being passive. One afternoon she did something small, but deliberate. She canceled an appearance. Lucas found out within minutes. She was sitting in the garden when he approached, jacket still on, eyes sharp with restrained fury. "Why wasn't my wife at the Blackwood Foundation luncheon?" he asked. Ava looked up calmly. "Because I didn't want to go." His jaw tightened. That event mattered. "So do I," she replied. "You don't get to make unilateral decisions," he said coldly. She stood. "Neither do you." Silence fell. No one had spoken to Lucas Blackwood that way in years. "You signed an agreement," he reminded her. "Yes," Ava said, "to marry you, not to disappear." For the first time, Lucas looked unsettled. That night, tension crackled between them like electricity. They shared the same space, but not the same world. Ava sat at the desk, researching opportunities, anything that would give her purpose beyond being his wife. Lucas watched her from across the room. "You're planning something," he said. She didn't look up. "I'm reclaiming my life," he scoffed. "From me?" She met his gaze. "From this." Days later, Ava accepted an invitation to volunteer at a local women's business center. Quietly, without consulting Lucas. It was her first step toward independence. She came home glowing. Lucas noticed. "You seem energized," he said. "I did something meaningful today," she replied. For myself, something twisted in his chest. At the next public event, Ava spoke confidently, engaging guests, voicing opinions Lucas hadn't anticipated. People listened. They admired her intelligence. Some even sought her out. Lucas watched, conflicted. He had married her to save her family and to secure a strategic alliance. He hadn't expected her to shine, and he hadn't expected the uncomfortable truth rising inside him. He didn't want anyone else to see her the way he was beginning to. Later that night, Ava confronted him. "You don't get to parade me when it suits you and silence me when it doesn't." Lucas replied sharply, "You knew what this marriage was." "Yes," she said, "but I didn't know who you were." He turned away. "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I see someone who confuses control with care, that cut deeper than she knew." Days passed. The arguments softened into conversations into something more dangerous. Understanding. Luke as began noticing things. How Ava spoke with warmth to staff. How she challenged ideas respectfully. How she refused to be small. And Ava noticed things too. Lucas worked endlessly, not for pleasure, but pressure. He carried the weight of expectations he'd never voiced. His arrogance was armor, forged by years of never being allowed to fail. One evening, Ava found him alone in his study, staring at financial projections. "You don't sleep," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "There's too much at stake. For you," she replied. "Or for the empire." He exhaled. "They're the same." She sat across from him. "You don't have to carry everything alone." He looked at her then, really looked. "You don't understand," he said. If I lose control, everything collapses. Or maybe, Ava said gently, something better grows. The words stayed with him. Then came the turning point. Ava received an offer, an opportunity to lead a small startup initiative at the Women's Center. It was modest, independent. Hers, she told Lucas that night. I'm accepting, she said firmly. He stiffened. That will interfere with Blackwood obligations. I'll manage both, she replied. No, he said, I need you here. The truth spilled out before he could stop it. I need you, he said. Ava's heart raced. Why? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned away. That was the moment Ava realized something terrifying. Lucas Blackwood didn't just want control, he wanted her. And he didn't know how to love without ownership. As she lay awake that night, Ava understood the danger clearly. This marriage was no longer just a contract, it was a battlefield between freedom and desire, and neither of them was ready for what came next. The shift between Ava and Lucas was subtle at first, like the tension in the air before a storm. They argued less, but the silence between them grew heavier. It was no longer empty, it was charged with things neither of them knew how to say. Ava threw herself into her work at the Women's Business Center. The startup project demanded her attention, her creativity, her voice. For the first time since the wedding, she felt like Ava Hart again, not Mrs. Blackwood, not a symbol, not a bargaining chip. Lucas noticed her absence immediately. The house felt quieter, dinner was colder, even the staff seemed unsure how to behave when Ava wasn't there to soften the edges of his moods. He told himself it didn't matter, that he preferred efficiency, control. But he found himself checking the time more often, asking questions he never asked before. She'll be late tonight, the house manager said carefully. Lucas nodded, irritation flickering. He didn't like the feeling crawling under his skin, something uncomfortably close to jealousy. When Ava finally returned home that evening, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with excitement. She spoke animatedly about progress, funding leads, and women who finally believed in their own ideas. Lucas listened in silence. You didn't even ask, she said after a while. Ask what? He replied. About my day. He hesitated. How was it? She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. It was mine. That night, Lucas stood at the window of his study long after Ava had gone to bed. The empire he had built felt suddenly fragile, not because of markets or mergers, but because of one woman who refused to bend. The confrontation came sooner than either of them expected. A photo surfaced online, Ava at a networking event, laughing beside a male investor, harmless, professional. But the media twisted it instantly. Blackwood heir is seen getting cozy with rival executive. Lucas saw red. He waited for Ava in the living room, pacing like a caged animal. When she entered, his voice cut through the air. Who is he? She froze. Excuse me? The E-man in the photo, Lucas said sharply. Do you enjoy humiliating me? Ava stared at him in disbelief. I was working. You represent my name, he snapped. I represent myself, she shot back. You crossed a line. No, she said firmly. You did. Lucas stepped closer, towering, his anger barely restrained. I won't be made a fool, and I won't be controlled, Ava replied, unflinching. Something broke then. Do you know what people say about you? Lucas demanded. That you married into power and forgot your place. Ava's breath hitched. You don't get to define my place. Silence crashed between them. Then Lucas said the words he could never take back. This marriage exists because I allowed it. Ava's face went pale. You didn't allow anything, she whispered. You bought it. The sound of her heels echoed as she turned and walked away, out of the room, out of his control, out of something that could never be undone. She didn't come back that night. Lucas barely slept. Anger faded into something far worse, regret. By morning, headlines had changed. Speculation grew. Investors called. board members whispered. Lucas handled the crisis flawlessly, but he couldn't handle the emptiness. Ava stayed with a friend. She cried alone for the first time in months, not because of fear but clarity. She had tried to fight for herself within the marriage. Lucas had shown her exactly how far he was willing to go to keep her in place. When Lucas finally called, she answered, but her voice was calm, distant. "I'm not coming home," she said. He clenched his jaw. "This isn't over. It is for me," Ava replied. Days passed. Ava focused on her work, building momentum without Blackwood resources. It was harder, slower, but it was real. Lucas, meanwhile, unraveled in ways no one could see. He attended meetings on autopilot. He snapped at executives. He stared at empty chairs where Ava used to sit during dinners she never wanted to attend. He told himself he was angry. The truth was far more dangerous. He missed her, not the image, not the wife, her, the woman who challenged him, who saw through him, who refused to be owned. Lucas did something unprecedented. He showed up at the Women's Business Center. Ava stepped out to see him standing there, out of place, powerful, uncertain. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know," he replied. For a moment, neither spoke. "I was wrong," Lucas said quietly. She crossed her arms. "Which part?" "All of it." The words tasted unfamiliar. Humbling. "I don't know how to love without control," he admitted. "But I know this, I don't want to lose you." Ava's heart ached. "Wanting isn't enough." "I'm learning that," he said. She studied him. This wasn't the man who had ordered her life like a business deal. This was someone standing at the edge of something terrifying. Change. "You can't keep me," Ava said softly. Lucas nodded. "Then don't let me." The silence between them wasn't hostile anymore. It was uncertain, fragile, and full of possibility. But Ava knew better than to believe in apologies alone. Love would demand more than words, and Lucas Blackwood had never been tested like this before. Change did not come easily to Lucas Blackwood. Apologies were unfamiliar, vulnerability even more so. Yet after standing outside the Women's Business Center and watching Ava walk back inside without inviting him to follow, something inside him finally shifted. For the first time in his life, control had failed him, and he had no one to blame but himself. Ava returned home a week later, not because Lucas asked her to, but because she chose to. The house felt different, quieter, less oppressive. Lucas had moved his things into the guest room. He didn't announce it. She simply noticed. They existed in careful proximity, circling each other, like strangers learning a new language. Conversations were short but respectful. Lucas asked before making decisions that involved her. Ava kept her distance, protecting the fragile independence she had built. The outside world, however, was less forgiving. Rumors began spreading about marital trouble, about Ava's growing influence outside Blackwood Industries, about Lucas losing his edge. Board members questioned his judgment. Investors watched closely. Then came the ultimatum. Lucas sat at the head of the boardroom table as the chairman spoke plainly. "Your personal life is affecting the company. Either your wife steps back from public ventures, or we reconsider your leadership." Lucas felt the weight of the room pressing down on him. In the past, the answer would have been immediate, not this time. He asked for 48 hours. That evening, Lucas found Ava in the garden. "They want you gone," he said simply. She didn't flinch. "From where?" "From everything," he replied. "Your projects, your independence." Ava looked at him carefully. "And what do you want?" Lucas swallowed. "I want you to stay, but not like that." Silence stretched. "I won't shrink myself again," Ava said firmly. "I know," Lucas replied, "and that's why I won't ask you to." The decision cost him more than he anticipated. At the next board meeting, Lucas stood his ground. He defended Ava's work. He rejected the ultimatum. By the end of the week, his position as CEO was under formal review. The media exploded. Ava watched the headlines with a mix of guilt and fear. "You didn't have to do this," she told him. "Yes," Lucas said quietly. "I did." For the first time, Ava saw something she hadn't expected: selflessness. But love still wasn't safe. One night, Ava admitted the truth she'd been avoiding. "I don't trust that this won't change you back." Lucas nodded. "That's fair. I need space," she continued. "Real space." He didn't argue. Instead, Lucas did something even harder. He let her go. Ava moved into a small apartment near the center where she worked. It was modest, peaceful, hers. She grew faster without the Blackwood shadow looming. Investors listened to her. Women followed her lead. She thrived. Lucas, meanwhile, stepped down as CEO, voluntarily. The world was stunned. For the first time in his life, Lucas Blackwood was no longer the most powerful man in the room, and he had never felt more uncertain. Months passed. They spoke occasionally, respectfully, carefully. The bond between them hadn't disappeared. It had transformed into something quieter, deeper, unfinished. One evening, Ava received a message. "Lucas, can we talk? No expectations." She hesitated, then agreed. They met at a small cafe. No press, no luxury, no power. Just two people. "I've been offered a different role," Lucas said. "Advisor. No control, just contribution." Ava smiled faintly. "That suits you." He returned the smile. "You changed me." She shook her head. "You chose to change." They sat in silence, comfortable now. "I won't ask you to come back," Lucas said. "But I hope someday you'll want to." Ava looked at him, really looked. The arrogance was gone. What remained was honesty. The question wasn't whether Lucas could love her. It showed he could. It was whether love was enough after everything. Ava stood, heart racing. "I don't know what the future holds." Lucas rose too. "Neither do I." She paused at the door. "But this time, if we try again, it will be on equal ground." Lucas nodded. "That's all I want." As Ava walked away, she realized something profound. The man who once couldn't let her go had finally learned how. And that might be the very thing that brought them back together. Time changed everything, but not in the way either of them expected. 6 months passed after that coup. E.T. meeting in the cafe. Ava's life no longer revolved around reacting to Lucas Blackwood. Instead, it moved forward with purpose. Her initiative at the Women's Business Center had grown into a recognized program, helping dozens of women secure funding, mentorship, and confidence. Ava was no longer fighting to be heard. People sought her voice. She lived modestly, worked relentlessly, and slept peacefully, yet Lucas never fully left her thoughts. Not the man he had been, but the man he was becoming. Lucas, for his part, lived a quieter life. He accepted the advisory role, working behind the scenes rather than at the head of the table. Without the armor of power, he was forced to confront who he was without control. Therapy, solitude, long walks at night. Things he once dismissed as weakness became survival. He learned how to listen. He learned how to wait. And most importantly, he learned that love was not something to secure. It was something to earn. They ran into each other again by accident, a charity conference. Ava was a keynote speaker. Lucas sat in the back row, unnoticed, listening as she spoke with clarity and strength about choice, autonomy, and partnership. When the applause filled the room, Lucas didn't clap loudly. He simply smiled. After the event, Ava found him waiting outside. "You didn't tell me you'd be here," she said. "I didn't want to influence anything," he replied. They walked together, not touching, not rushing. "I'm proud of you," Lucas said. Ava met his eyes. "That means more now than it ever did before." There was no dramatic confession that day, no promises, just honesty. They began seeing each other slowly. Coffee, conversations, shared silences. No expectations, no titles. Lucas never asked her to come back. Ava noticed. One evening, months later, Ava stood at the edge of a pier, watching the water ripple beneath the fading sun. Lucas joined. Her, hands in his pockets. I was offered the CEO position back, he said quietly. Her heart skipped, but her face remained calm. And I turned it down, he continued. I realized I don't want a life that costs me myself, or you. She studied him. That was your choice? Yes, he said. Not for us. For me. Ava smiled softly. That's the first time I've heard you say that. The wind carried the moment gently between them. I love you, Lucas said. Not urgently, not desperately, just truthfully. Ava closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was steady. I love you too. This time, love didn't feel like surrender. It felt like standing tall. They didn't rush into living together. They didn't erase the past. They acknowledged it, learned from it. Their marriage contract still existed on paper, but it no longer defined them. 1 year later, Ava invited Lucas to her apartment for dinner. Afterward, she handed him an envelope. Inside was a document, divorce papers. Lucas looked up, startled, but not angry. I don't want to be married because we were forced, Ava said gently. I want to choose you, freely. Lucas's eyes filled with emotion. So this is goodbye? She shook her head, smiling through tears. No, this is a beginning. They signed the papers together. And then Lucas reached into his pocket, pulling out something small, a ring, not extravagant, simple, honest. I won't ask you tonight, he said, or tomorrow, or ever, unless you want me to. Ava laughed softly, overwhelmed. You really did change, Lucas smiled. You taught me how. Months later, they stood in a small garden surrounded by friends. No contracts, no obligations, no expectations, just love. Ava walked toward Lucas with confidence, not fear. When she took his hands, she felt no chains, only choice. And Lucas Blackwood, the man who once couldn't let her go, finally understood the truth. Love was never about holding on. It was about standing beside someone who stayed because they wanted to,